Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about coworkers and criticisms. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, when your coworker says as part of a code review that a specific type of implementation is not expected from a senior engineer, is that criticism of the code or the engineer? Hmm, I would I would say that it's probably of the engineer. Usually when people criticize code, it's well, at least what I can find is that if the issue is with the code, the the feedback is usually related to the code itself, like what is it doing. It's more crisp, more to the point. An example would be that, well, you're using a lambda when you could have used a class, or if you could simplify this, like there's some type of constructive feedback or something specific about the thing that they want to see, like, oh, you use a variable instead of a constant. I'm taking these silly examples now because they're sort of digestible, I think, for anybody who might be listening or watching. But usually when it comes to a question of style and form of what you're doing, the feedback is usually broader than that. It's more related. When somebody says that this is not expected from a senior engineer, it's usually that you have multiple things going on in the code, and there are multiple things that the person takes issue with. And when someone writes software in a poor manner or things like that, that's sort of the thing, like these holistic big picture type of issues. That's the thing that usually gets you this sort of feedback. Uh, and this happens, guys. This is it's sad, but it's true. The reality is, as I've said before, that software development is a talent industry. Uh, or talent business. It really is. It comes down to learning a skill set, and which is part science or part engineering, call it what you want, and part art. And in some cases in some cases it might be the case that you're not doing so poorly actually, because the person you're working with have very strong opinions about how to do things correctly or something like that. But in some cases, the reality is that you are what I call like you're not what I call a true senior. It's just a term that you have been given by someone somewhere, but your skills, like your actual engineering skills, are not up to snuff. And that does happen. It happens a lot, I would say. You work with software developers, rather you will work with software developers who are, like, they have the label senior, but there's nothing senior about the code. If you look at the way that they write code, it's usually it might not actually be so good. And when you get that sort of feedback, I can basically tell you that the person has identified or believes that you don't have the sort of seniority that you might be claiming that you have, or so forth. And there is very little you can do about that, because it really comes down to this thing that I can't really tell you. I can't, because I haven't seen the code, so I can't tell you if that is a true statement. Are you a senior, yes or no? Or is it just that you're dealing with an individual who has a lot of strong opinions? Uh, so what I suggest that you do in this sort of situation is that you sort of realize that uh, this this attitude is probably not going to go anywhere. I've never really seen that happen, because the fundamental problem that I've raised a few times with my videos is that, because people ask me, because they are looking for this sort of, well, of course everybody can become a senior software developer, when the reality is that no, they can't. It's like saying that everybody can become an Olympic athlete, or become like the best of something, so forth and so forth. And I'm just talking now in general terms. Guys, there are software developers who work their entire careers who never ever get to a skill level where they could quote unquote work at, say, Google, or some, use whatever benchmark you have for like success in our industry and so forth. It doesn't have to be a company like that. There are many companies out there who have engineers, like real engineers, who have like they have standards of a level where people, not everybody's going to be able to work there. That doesn't mean that you can't make a living as a software developer, just as there are companies who work with, I'm not going to say this or that, but guys, it's not the end of the world for you if you have someone who tells you that your code isn't like something expected from a senior engineer. Because as I said, it really comes down, there's nothing you can do about it really, apart from the obvious thing, which is work harder, code more, etc., etc. But I mean, the reality is that I don't know you. You could be working your ass off. This could be just someone who's being a little bit of they're judging you based on some arbitrary little thing, and the problem is really them. Or it can be that you're not really all into this thing, and so forth and so forth. Or maybe there's there's a million things that can go on, and the only thing you can ever do here is to shrug it off and try to do better. That's what it fundamentally comes down to. So what I want you to take away from this is that if somebody tells you that you're writing code that is not expected from a senior software engineer, that's usually very personal. In my experience, it's not something, because usually when people have an issue with the code, it's not a question of your skills. The criticisms, or like the suggestions, the feedback is usually very specific. It's usually things related to the code itself, like doing a concrete change on something you did or so forth. That's very different. In this situation, it sounds to me more that they're basically saying that all this code is shit, or like this is not up to a certain quality level. When it's such a broad type of thing, it's usually that they have an issue with how you write code overall. And this usually happens either with people who are very opinionated, like there are some very, very elitist people, which can happen, for sure it can happen, or it happens when you basically don't have down the core skills of software development. Like you're, as I like to say, you're not a true senior, because senior is a term that it's a nothing term in our industry. Anybody who has 4 years can throw senior on their CV, and if you go to the consultancies, they will like slap senior on anything. I promise you they will slap senior on absolutely anything, because it means people that you can probably hire for more money, or like they're supposed to know stuff. And when you interview and talk to a lot of people, these developers, they're like they're not like seniors, at least not in my per my definition. And so if you get this sort of feedback, it really just comes down to, as I said, you can really only, all right, it sucks, try to do better, or go and work with someone who has a low, if that doesn't work out, because this is not an uncommon thing where you will hear in like interviews, and like this is the number one thing. If you are a quote unquote senior and you keep getting rejected from positions or things like that, or you can't really keep down like work in like bigger IT companies and so forth, is very likely due to the fact of this. As I said, the fact is that you might not actually be a real senior. It's like your skills are subpar according to the people that you are working with. And in those sorts of situations, you, as I said, you can only try harder, work harder, and invest more and become better at the craft, or you can take a look at projects where the requirements are not as strict or as high and so forth. And trust me, guys, there are plenty of people who spend most of their career like working in various companies where like the reality is that most companies don't have a good way of figuring out if you're actually any good or not. IT is a big gut feeling driven type of thing where in one company you might have a tech lead or someone or a manager who really knows their shit, and you can't work for them because they can tell that you can't really, like, you're not really all that good, for example. And in another company it might be that you just can sort of do whatever the fuck you want, and then it doesn't really matter. And there's tons of this like unfairness or like weirdness going on in the companies around. It's the same thing for the people who are really good. You could be like one of the best software developers, but you work in a company where you have like a super opinionated tech lead who like thinks that everything that is, I don't know, functional is bad or something like that, and you can literally get fired even though you're the best of the best. And then you go to another company and there's no problem. So think about those sorts of things. Have a great day.